And welcome to Thru Port Collective. This is Marshall, and I'm here with Cryss and Tim, my buddies here on the show. And today we've got a great show for you. We're going to talk about less is more and more is less, more or less, something like that. So I survived the hurricane. I'm here in Florida. Lucky here. So just want to say shout out to Fort Myers and those areas down there that were actually pretty heavily impacted. Hopefully you get a quick recovery down there for those folks. And like I said, feel very, very lucky at this point. But anyways, what have you guys been up to? I heard you guys had a show last week or something.
Yeah, we had fun.
We did.
Excellent.
We did. You were busy enjoying a hurricane.
I was busy hoping my house didn't blow down.
Yeah. Like that night. Well, yeah, we missed you, and we had Steve Connolly on, who
excellent,
cool guy, and like it was cool to hear what he's up to. So it was a fun show.
Good to hear. What you been up to, Tim, other than last week?
I had a weekend of just enjoying music here in Nashville. It was cool. I went to the Nashville Symphony Friday night. They were performing The Planets, which is a really cool piece.
Oh, yeah.
It moves all around the orchestra, and it's, oh, man, I mean, it sounds like it's been imitated.
It's like very Star Wars-y, right? I heard that, like,
yes.
I've listened to it, and it's predates Star Wars by, like, a long time, right? The Planets?
1917.
Like oh, okay. Wow, even older than I thought.
A little bit. 60 years.
It's amazing, though. If you guys haven't heard The Planets, go listen to it. I think you can listen to it on YouTube even.
Yeah. There's free versions to go here for sure, wherever. So that was really great and impactful, and the orchestra did a really great job. It's a beautiful piece, and like you were saying, you can really hear it's been imitated so many times throughout the years that it feels like an old friend, even if you've never heard it before, because so many other people have sort of imitated it.
Yeah.
To do Trekkie and
awesome.
Star Wars.
In real life, though, that's cool.
Yeah, 5 rows back. It was amazing.
Wow.
It was really cool. So that was fun. Paul St. Williams and all movie composers lean into Holst. I mean, there you go. Absolutely. So that was really cool to go and hear. And then, I don't know, I've been working on some music, but I hired a guy to come help me do some cable management and some other things around here. I just sort of lost momentum in my studio a little bit. So I actually hired a guy to come in and just kind of help me with some ideas and tighten my room up a little bit and just help, be another guy there to be on the other end of a cable and going, yeah, here, pull that through.
Yeah.
Right.
Because sometimes that's all you need. And I just kind of hit the wall, with my motivation, and I don't want to be in that position, but it's been a challenging year. So anyway, that's kind of mostly what I've been doing. Off to New York City for a week tomorrow.
Oh, awesome! What you got going on over there?
It's just pleasure.
Pleasure, no business.
No biz.
Do it. What about you, Cryss? What's been going on, man?
It's been very busy, and nobody's quite yet noticed yet, but. It's not mine, unfortunately. I'm so sorry to say. But so on Saturday, two of my buddies came out, and one brought his new Oberheim OBX8, which I am lucky enough to borrow for a couple of weeks. So he got to play it for a day and a half, and was already on his way out to Italy for anniversary. So I get to watch the baby. And then on my desk, also my other buddy brought out an Ovation Summit, which I traded him for, and just really cool synth. I had it for quite a while, I don't know, a year or two ago, and made a lot of patches on it, so it was kind of fun to hear it. And I went and I updated the firmware. I played through all my patches I had made because they're still on here. And I was like, oh, yeah, this is great. I updated the firmware, and it's borked some of the modulation on it. So everything that had I had put Aftertouch vibrato on it, it's like increased the vibrato rate significantly. So if it was whatever around, 5 hertz or whatever. It's like
Double to
probably
triple.
double that. Yeah, because you go to first little holding a chord to go for some vibrato. You're like expecting to go whoa 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 whoa. And it's like
Oh, wow.
so at some point I got some work to do. So I had a fun little play on that. But while the Oberheim's here, I'm trying to get a lot of time on that. So that's been fun. Oh, and a project I finished up. Let me see. Let me get it ready here. I should have done this before. Nope, that's the wrong thing. They've changed it. They've changed stuff on here.
Oh, no.
Okay, yeah, all right here. So here
I
we
hate
go.
change
Now
them
we do
all.
this. All right, so worked on this week a collaboration project with Brian Oliva of Get Somebody Music, and he's one of our buds in the group. So we had some fun, and I had made a comment on one of his videos, like, "Hey, let's," and then he was like, "Hey, let's do something." And so, like, he sent over a track that he had worked out, and then I got to play some guitar on it. And so I'll play just a little bit of it, maybe like 20 or 30 seconds. So that'll be premiering tomorrow. I think I'll be 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. East Coast. And if you want to check that out, we'd love to have you stop in. It'll be on Brian's channel, Get Somebody Music. And I think he posted some stuff. I just said when I got on before the show, I noticed that there was some stuff posted. So there'll be links, and then I'll post it again. So, yeah, we'd love people to check it out.
Excellent.
Sounds killer, man.
Yeah, it does. Lots of Moogs in that one because I know he loves Moogs like me.
Yeah.
So that's cool.
I think he said he used like 5 different synths on this track,
Nice.
like Voyager and Matriarch and Moog 1 and some of his like Alesis and Yamaha.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds great, man. We'll check it out tomorrow.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, so you guys got your track coming out tomorrow. I got a track coming out tomorrow.
Nice.
So I don't know if the folks remember. It's probably like 2-3 weeks ago. We did the show where we kind of talked about some tracks that we were making.
Mm-hmm.
I had finished that one from like 2018 using the Uno synth. It's called Mente Mechanica, which is Italian for mechanical mind, and that's going to come out tomorrow. And you can go to my website, overclockedmusic.com, and if you'd like, you can be directed to Beatport and pick up a copy if you feel so inclined tomorrow.
Nice.
So there you go.
That's
Excellent.
awesome. It's done, yeah.
It's done. Whoops, I hit the wrong one. There you go.
When you were hunkered down during the hurricane, did you get more or less work?
So when I had power, which was kind of sporadic,
Yeah.
I didn't lose it for long periods of time, but enough that it was a little irritating. But once the power came back, I actually have been working on my live performance stuff. So I'm getting closer to getting that ready to actually record some stuff and put it out on my YouTube channel. So that'll be fun.
That's awesome.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah, so like the biggest sticking point for that has been trying to figure out how to get each one of the synths to respond correctly to its program change messages to switch patches. It's like weird stuff. Like I'm going to be using a JD08, and that's got like it responds on 3 different MIDI channels. Believe it or not, it's really weird. Like rolling weird stuff, And then the other ones, like I'm going to be using a V-Synth, but that thing has like 800 patches in it or something. Maybe more than that. Maybe it's like 1,000 or something. I can't remember. But because when you're trying to send program change messages over MIDI, it can only go up to like 127. So you gotta like, if you got patches that you want to use that are like further up the dial, you gotta copy them and move them
down.
So that's been the kind of the headache, is trying to get each one of the synths like working correctly, and then figuring out, like, I'm basically going to be making all new tracks for this whole thing. So that's the other challenge, is different sounds for different tracks all at the same time, like switching stuff around. Yeah, it's pretty complex. So, but
that's
it's
very complex.
Making some really good progress on it, though, and I'm going to be pretty excited when that's ready to go.
You said that was the V-Synth?
The V-Synth's one of the synths. There's going to be 7 hardware synths, and then I'll be doing some stuff also in Ableton with like Omnisphere and some stuff like that too.
Well, it'll still be easier for the on the V-Synth than getting the 2600 to do some patch changes, I imagine.
So the 2600 is probably going to be, unless I could figure out ways to patch quickly, it's probably just going to be relegated to bass. I think
that's not a bad thing to do.
No, and it sounds great. It does sound great for bass. So
that's the idea. Yeah, just give it a dedicated purpose, right? Since there are no no presets.
No presets.
Yeah, figuring out writing a live set is difficult, and because while you're writing, you're also really thinking about, now, how can I logistically pull these songs together live?
Exactly.
So you're not just composing music in the air. It also has that other, component to it.
I've got to be able to perform it at the same time. And I'm going to have to get kind of clever. I might use some foot switches and, pedals and stuff to do some automation. I don't know yet. That's all that stuff's kind of still in flux as I'm trying to kind of figure all that out still. But it's pretty fun. It's a lot of fun doing it. It's a whole different ball game than just sitting down and composing,
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That's going to be really cool, man. I can't wait to see what some of your solutions are to your problems,
Yeah, it'll be fun. Fun to talk
very
about.
Cool.
I don't remember if I shared it on the show. I don't think I did, but so my friend that I got the 2600 from, he emailed me some tracks, and like there's been a handful where he had recorded stuff back in the 70s with the 2600, and like singer-songwriter tracks where the 2600 is being used for strings and woodwinds and flutes and stuff that sounds like that in there. And he came across a few more, and one was 2 of them were kind of a movie theme type stuff, and one being like very kind of medieval hero kind of sounding, which was a really interesting composition. One was like swamp sounds, like special effects with the 2600, and the last one, which was just really killer, was it was again kind of a movie theme type thing, but it was like the evil motif in it, and he recorded it onto like a TIAC tape machine in 1975. And it had is a friend of his playing acoustic guitar. He played drums on it, and then he also did all the synth work on there. And I was listening to him, like it sounded a lot like "Welcome to the Machine" by Pink Floyd, with that kind of back and forth thing. But he did this before that album came out, and so I was like listening, like, and it was really amazing sounding, because it was. The most that I'd heard the synth showed off, and it was like very appealed to me musically, like stylistically it was real dark, and it had this real brooding, like, this bass thing going back and forth, and it had the like harmonized, filtered leads coming in, and it's really killer sounding. And so I was so excited to get that and to listen to it.
Yeah. That's cool. Well, yeah, what you did with Brian Oliva there, it certainly sounds a little Pink Floydish.
Yeah.
Be cool to hear. Can't wait to hear the whole thing. You said 2:00 tomorrow.
Yeah, 2:00 West Coast,
Okay.
5 your time,
5 my
and
time.
2 p.m. London.
Sweet.
Or 2, no, sorry, 10. See, they got me screwed up in the chat.
It's
Blame
plus
those people. No,
+6, right?
10
Or is it
p.m. 10 p.m. London.
So it's +5 from East Coast. Okay.
Yeah, I think they're 8 ahead of me. So if it's 2, then 10. Yeah, 5. Yeah.
Because they're either
Uh,
5 or 6 hours ahead of me here Eastern time. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And hello to
5.
Steve in the chat. If anybody missed last week, we already talked about it a little bit, but Steve Connolly joined us and encouraged you to catch up on that episode because it was a really good one too. So I guess this week, the topic is, well, we started with less is more, but then I wanted to add to that also more is more. And to kind of like figure all this kind of stuff out, like in terms of, in composing and recording, arranging, maybe also too, like with our gear, when that can be, when do we need to prefer one or the other, and kind of sorting through some of these problems because it does affect a lot of what we do, and it's kind of one of these abstract ideas. And of course, we always hear people say, well, less is more, and then sometimes, against that you hear more is more, or what's the other one? Less is more is more, and less is a bore, right? So. So I don't know. What have you guys been thinking about this so far? Like, where do we want to start?
You want to just start with from a standpoint of production, because
Yeah.
we can go down the writing road, we can go down the instrument choices, but which kind of falls under production. You guys want to start with the production thoughts of that?
Yeah, I can say that in my experience, a lot of times I try and stuff too much stuff into my tracks sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And I will find myself sometimes if I'm struggling, it's maybe I need to pull this sound out or that sound out. And then sometimes it's bam, that was it. I just had too much going on. That happens quite a bit with me because I get excited and I try and get I want to hit people with walls of sound.
Mm-hmm.
And I want one of my goals when I produce is, especially if you're listening on a good system or headphones, I want you to be able to hear every little nuance that's in that track. So sometimes when you get a little excited and you're layering too much, it's impossible to do that. And that's another reason sometimes to pull some things out is you're losing clarity or you're getting things muddy. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in and say that kind of work it a little bit backwards from that, but the music that sometimes I find most impactful that as a listener is the stuff that has just the right amount of sonic fullness and timbral textures, and there's a point where it becomes too much. And I've just noticed that what I tend to gravitate towards personally is something where it's a little more pared down, but because of that, you can really hear subtleties and nuance and the full range of some of the sounds. So I kind of want to approach it that way too, is that as a listener, I really like hearing things that just sound fantastic. The individual sounds are fascinating, and there aren't so many that I'm overloaded.
Yeah, it's about finding that balance, right?
Yeah, and that balance is not always in the same place every time.
Right.
I mean, depending on genre and band, and it is interesting. I think about so I love the Beatles, particularly the like maybe 1965 and on, because that's when to me things got really interesting, recording wise. They were always great songwriters, but how they worked out some of these things in the studio and started experimenting. And when they came out in the early 90s, they came out with this set of albums called the Beatles Anthology. And basically what they did is they had dug up a lot of old tapes that at that point nobody had heard, and so for the first time we were hearing the demos of these tracks or different versions of them, and different arrangements of songs, and hearing over months and months how a song evolved. And I always thought one of the most interesting parts of it is when you hear songs that so well, but then you hear some other different part in there that you're not familiar with, and it sounds off. Occasionally it sounds good, but a lot of times you're like, well, there's that extra guitar part there, and it kind of sounds funny because I'm not used to it. And to think that these recording artists that and for them they had a lot of control over their music, went through and they had to decide about all these different tracks, which ones to include. And not to say that it was always perfect, but they did a pretty good job at it. And some tracks are very busy and some are not, and some got the Phil Spector treatment, unfortunately.
So it's funny that you mentioned that, because you have a thing with the Beatles and then that whole thing. I actually have gone down that rabbit hole a little bit with some Michael Jackson stuff. There's some people online that have some older, like earlier versions of some of his hits. I don't know how they got a hold of them, but it's really interesting to hear kind of how things start, and then where obviously the finished product, because Michael Jackson. But it's really cool to kind of see where things were at certain points in the production process, and then to see how, like, what changes they made for the final version. And it's really interesting because, like you said, like sometimes there'll be like a different part in there, and you're like, "What is this? It sounds weird." I'm glad they figured it out, But had it been released probably as it was, it would be weird without it too. So it's kind of one of those things, like your ear just gets used to. If you're used to a certain thing and then you hear a different version, it's like, whoa, that's kind of weird.
I think one of the other tracks that had a lot cut out of it would have been Good Vibrations by the Beach Boys. And that's an epic song, and it's got so many different parts, and it's really an orchestration of all these different elements coming together. And I grew up hearing that song on the radio, and it's like, I like the Beach Boys, okay, as a kid. Like, okay. But then to really grasp how epic of a song that is, and then fast forward, become a musician and rediscovering that song and how cool it is. And then by that time in the 90s, they had released again, these albums, or 2000s, whenever it was, where they had extended versions. So instead of however long it is, I can't remember, 6 or 7 minutes, and then have like a 8 or 12-minute version of it. I don't remember, but to hear all these other sections in it, like what they were thinking, and then I think sometimes like they did really make the best decision to cut some stuff out. You're like, well, that's a little bit hokey. That's kind of a weird thing for such an epic song to have this little part in it. That's odd.
But it shows, like, what it tells me is that, like, I'm on the right track, because like I run into that all the time. I'm like, I feel like this part probably sucks, and I think I'm just going to take this little melody out, or this sound that I'm using. I don't like it. I'm going to change it. And it's reassuring when your heroes, you find out they do the same stuff. So it's part of the process.
It is. Go ahead, Chris.
Go ahead.
No, it's just that part of it, of music creation, is super fascinating, because and production, because as you're putting stuff down, you want to cut yourself the slack to do some experimenting and to try some ideas. So now you're into that territory where, all right, it was already probably full enough, but like I'm hearing something, or I want to try something, or I want to add this, idea. Right? And so if you don't allow yourself the the ability to go too far, you should. I think that's what you do, is you allow yourself to go like past the point,
Mm-hmm.
and then you come back and go, all right, what out of everything I've thrown at the wall here is truly essential, and what's exciting me now that maybe I did add after the fact, that maybe something that was on there originally gets cut. And so then you go back and start thinning out. But I think it's important to let yourself kind of go a little too far with the exact knowledge that you are going to come back and look at what can be thinned out or improved in the way of making things a little sparser. So that's a kind of a cool part of that process,
It's almost like in film, when they got too many scenes and they got to cut stuff down. It's like that whole process of like getting that flow in the movie correct, and the pacing and everything. It's kind of the same kind of thing in a way.
Yeah.
Very much is, yeah, because pacing is equally important in music as it is in a film. I mean, they're both linear art forms. You have to experience them, and as time goes by, you can't stare at it all at once like a painting. Which it's linear, yeah.
Yeah.
I like that analogy, Marshall. I mean, it is very much like that, because in the film, you're thinking about, is a story still being told without this part? And if it is, then we can take it out and we can have something else remain. And I think with music, it maybe gets a little bit more difficult. I mean, I got to hand it to directors and editors of film, because they know the full picture, and then they have to kind of put themselves in the position of a viewer that goes, I haven't seen that scene. Does it still make sense?
Right.
And
or
it
if
can
I leave it in, is it going to mess stuff up leaving it in too? So, it's like it's very similar in that way, because you're creating art and you want to have people be entertained by this and enjoy it. So those are decisions that you got to make.
Yeah, is it adding to the story, or is it watering the story down or slowing the momentum?
Right.
Because I remember which of you was talking about it, but that thing about having elements be distinctive, because that is one of the dangers, because you can orchestrate things so much out in the parts that you add, that one really great part gets buried in it and you can't hear that. It just doesn't have the impact of it.
Yeah, I don't know why, but for me, that's like been a super important thing. Like, I try and get as clean of mixes as I can, and I want the listener to be able to hear every single detail.
Mm-hmm.
I know that there are techniques and stuff where sometimes you hide things with other things and you get some effects that way. But I don't tend to do that very often. I try and like let you. I want the listener to be able to hear it. Every little thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like hard to achieve sometimes.
It
I
is.
think it's easier with electronic music, honestly, because you can get perfect sound into your audio interface. And with our tools that we have now, it's a lot easier to sculpt and shape things and get them to fit like a puzzle. I think that would have been extremely difficult back in the days of using tape and some of these other, older analog formats.
Yeah,
I don't have any experience with that, though. I mean, do any of you guys?
Yeah,
I've done tape, and I know Tim has a lot more than I have. I'd imagine too, not just the format, but so we were talking before the show about artwork, and so Marshall did some really amazing stuff with AI for that track he's releasing.
So cool, yeah.
And we were talking about other stuff that we've done, and so like I have to get out the the visual editor for our thumbnails and stuff, and I was telling him like I sit down to it, like if you show me a couple different things visually, like I'm usually pretty in tune with like what looks good and what doesn't, but when it comes to the creative process of it, and part of it that when I sit to do it, I don't yet really have a full grasp on what's possible, what's a standard thing to do. And so like I had to text my friend to like what kind of text, what font should I use for this text, and what color, and really simple things like that. But I don't have the kind of vocabulary for working visually that I do with audio, and I think it could be like that too. And I think with you know, when we look back over the last 70 years of music, at least, I mean, we've got a really rich vocabulary. You know, we've heard, even a person that's not a musician that's around today, they've heard so many different styles of music and so many great pop songs and rock songs and everything else that they kind of have some idea of how things should sound. And imagine working in the 60s or the 70s, where, I mean, music had progressed a lot as far as recording techniques, but still you're trying to figure out how to do this and what you can do and what's possible, but without that kind of, you know, vocabulary, and have read, 50 years worth of music. You don't have it. You know, it's like, well, if I go back a little before rock and roll, and there's like, skiffle and big band and blues and jazz, and that maybe some of that stuff's not affecting the stuff you're doing in 1974, that can be a difficult thing. And I think a lot of times that could be a problem for a lot of newer musicians, and that when you sit down to arrange your music, you don't yet know what's possible.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe, I mean, that's where, like what you were talking about, Tim, is like sometimes you just have to throw stuff at the wall, put too much stuff in, and experiment with it.
So is that when the more is more?
Well, yeah.
For a minute, no, not really, because you're still not justifying that you're going to stay there, right?
Yeah, but it's part of the process, right?
But it is mine. I mean, I've just learned that I do good that way because I like to have fun, and I like to like goof around, and I'll get some solid ideas, but then it's fun to like do something kind of out, like a little beyond the edge of the solar system there for a second.
Yeah, Tim likes the reverb before the delay.
Yes. Yes. Oh, I do want to play the patch for the good people listening at home.
Oh yeah, play it.
I mean, just for the heck of it, that's just a good moment to do that. So patch of the day. Yeah, I have this Studio Electronics Tone Star module. I mean, I can just spin this around, at least enough to see. It's the one I'm using right now is this guy, and it's got like the 106 style filter on it. But it's just a monosynth. Anyway, I came up with the envelope out of the ADSR and put that into the decay time of Starlab, the reverb by Strymon. And so there's no reverb happening. It blossoms as the filter gets opened. So it kind of sounds like this. And then the decay is quick. The decay is based on the filter decay as well, or release time. So it's pretty
sounds
neat.
Awesome. Yeah. Can you hit a super low note for me, like a super low one, low E. There you go. Yeah.
So it's kind of neat, yeah, because it becomes part of the timbre of the synth, really. But
That
all of
sounds
that,
good.
like without that. Yeah, that didn't bypass it altogether. Anyway, it was patch of the day. It was patch of the day. I was just having fun with it, so I thought I'd share.
I like that.
But Marshall, you're saying in the piece you're working on that you've got kind of a similar thing going on, that when, or at least technique-wise, when filters open up, you also increase reverb time.
Yes. Well, so the way it worked in the Mente Mechanica track is I have my Uno synth, and I have like short quarter notes kind of for the main bass melody, and the filter is mostly closed, and you have just a tiny bit of reverb on that. But as I open the filter at certain points in the track, especially when the track's like going full bore and like it's wide open for a few measures, the reverb picks up on the higher end frequencies. I use that Art Acoustic reverb, and you can kind of EQ out the low end. So the low end isn't affected by the EQ, or sorry, by the reverb. It's the higher end frequencies, and you can put that cross point like wherever you want, basically. And I have it at a nice spot, I think, especially for how that sounds in that track. But it's very similar to kind of what you're doing there. I think it's a little bit different technique and how to accomplish that. But basically, as the filter opens up, you get more high frequencies, and those are affected by the reverb.
Yeah. That's great. So you're basically like doing a high pass on the reverb, essentially.
On the reverb, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That stuff is fun, like that's the bit, and part of why I was goofing with that particular patch was because, when you have reverb slathered all over everything, then you start to lose all that detail, and so in the context of our topic, like you start to lose detail if you're slathering reverb all over everything, then everything becomes smeared and everything's at the back,
Mm-hmm.
Part of the idea of reverb is spatial, relation, right? So some things that are drier seem nearer, and that type of obvious thing. But like that was one thing I liked about this is only when it's playing, and then as soon as that note's off, it wraps up pretty quickly and it gets out of the way. So your other tones are left to shine.
It's kind of like the whole puzzle piece thing, right? And one of the things I do in my productions is I like to focus the listener attention on different elements at certain times in the track, because I think sometimes, maybe you're not being as creative melodically, but you're trying to drive the listener to focus on elements and tones and things instead, which can be fun. So, and one of the ways to do that is kind of like what you're talking about with opening things up and then bringing them out pretty quickly. Like so when you stop playing that, then it clamps down pretty quick, so you don't get a long tail,
right,
for what you're doing there. And you can then focus on something else, or different elements come through then at that point. So
that's definitely a less is more thought, really.
I did in a similar way. So the track that Brian and I did, and I mean, we know like Moogs are just so fat and wonderful sounding, and had a lot going on in the track. And there was a part that he did that sounded wonderful, and it's this Brian's doing it on the matriarch, and when you listen to the track, it's in the middle of the song, like when the electric guitars come in, you can hear it. But one of the problems that we're having is it like sounded so good on its own. It was big and fat. I mean, it was all matriarch, and it was being arpeggiated, and then he had it set up to where it was kind of pulsing a bit, but it was like still pretty smooth sounding. And I was having a hard time, being able to like fit that into place, because it was such a cool sounding part. And so one of the things I did was I used the Eventide Fission 2, and it's this crazy plugin. They just came out with the second version of it, and it allows you to affect transient and tonal parts of your instrument separately, and you can do quite a few different effects. You can apply things just to one part or the other. And so one of the ways that I had used it was to tighten up the envelope of that sound, so kind of use it as a transient designer. And then I got it to be, because there was already, I think, some I don't remember if it was a stereo delay on the matriarch or stereo panning that he was doing, but there was some stereo stuff going on, and I just sharpened it up. I didn't change the tone of it at all. I didn't I didn't do the EQ stuff on it or anything like that. I tightened up that transient so that it would pop through. I could have it louder in the mix so that you could hear it more, because that's really what I wanted, but it got out of the way so quick as it was moving around that the other instruments still got to hold their space like that.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's a cool solution too, right?
Yeah, I mean, and that's not something that I had thought about doing before. I mean, that was kind of a trick that I was thinking, like, well, I have to think of outside of the box because this is such a cool part, and there were cool things going on that, like, it was. I don't want to. This is not a place I want to be sacrificing, you know, and so it was a way to like accentuate that part and push it up while getting it also out of the way of the other parts that were going on.
Perfect. That's so cool, man.
But it kind of reminded me because you're talking about how you're using the envelopes and stuff to affect reverbs, but also will work for the main body stuff too, and that can be a trick. Like how much, especially when you're talking with synthesizers and guitars, like how much sustain do you have going on? Because that can affect how it can affect how dense things are as well.
Well, it's funny because you talk about guitars, and one of the things is when I listen to rock,
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think. So, like, I was listening to some Nirvana not that long ago, and when you listen to their stuff, like, there's not a huge amount going on, like in terms of it's not jammed full of the gills. Like, you got your guitars filling up everything. So, I guess it makes sense, right? Because with most bands, like back in the day, it was like a bass player, like rhythm guitarist and lead guitarist, and that was kind of it, right? Maybe you have some keyboard guy maybe in the back, and the drummer, right? So it's interesting how you can get away with just a handful of instruments and create something really full like that. I think that would be extremely difficult to be creative in that guitars have a certain sound, and I know you can do things with like amps and distortions and things and pedals and stuff, but like it's not like a synth. Like you can get ridiculously different sounds out of these instruments compared to like a guitar. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you find, because I know you're into the guitar stuff, Chris, do you find when you are trying to be creative with the guitar that you're kind of having a hard time? Or like how do you work around, what do you do when you're working guitar stuff?
I mean, it would be a lot like working with synthesizers, except with a synthesizer, you're thinking, well, this sound needs to like last longer, and so you're turning up, the decay or the release on the envelopes to get it to sustain longer, and that pad to stretch out between chords and to fill that space, like if that's the effect that you want. And with guitars, you would have the same kind of thing that you'd want to do, but you'd have to go about accomplishing it in a sort of different way. And so, like if you're playing clean, starting to add stuff like reverb is going to help to fill that space, because even after the transient and tonal element of the guitar stops, you still have that wisp of sound going that's carrying it on without having it be there. And the thing with, like you're talking with guitars like you're talking about Nirvana, is that since distortion is causing compression, a lot of compression, and it's generating sustain, that when you have a lot of distortion like that, it tends to fill up a lot of space, because all of a sudden, I mean, your dynamics for a really distorted guitar part, like something you'd hear in say like a Metallica song or Pantera or something, like you're kind of like peaking all the time. It's just sitting there and it's flat dynamically, and so it's filling all that space. And usually the problem is from the other direction, that it's going to be too messy. I mean, if you hear shoegaze and stuff like that, it's just sloppy and messy, and just guitar and delay and reverb everywhere, and that's the effect that they're going for. But say like in metal tracks, then you have to figure out how to use a lot of distortion, but to be able to have distinct sounds and the transients be there. And so techniques like palm muting and how you're picking is going to help you to do that, to give it that rhythmic element to it. And of course, I think an excellent example to cite for like a guitar player who thinks creatively about sound design would be the Edge of U2, and some of the sounds that he did or does, with delay. And so having a delay that's synced to the BPM of the song and playing against the delay allows them a lot of space for a band that's 3 instruments and a singer. Oh, there. Well, that's, from Brian.
That's a funny one.
Sorry.
Excellent. Well, should we, you guys want to talk about like methods of when more is more? Or, when moments that more is more? Let's hit on that.
Yeah. Well, let's think of some, like, how about some examples, like just a couple examples of each, like less is more and more is more, if we can, and everybody in the chat too, like, let's maybe set some, like, this is an example where less is more and it really works, that we kind of have a frame of reference. In fact, we might be able to check some stuff out after the show and listen to it.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of some examples, some professional examples.
I mean, your Nirvana example, I think, is great.
Yeah, and a lot of like grunge was, kind of similar in that way. Like, not a lot in terms of a bunch of different melodies and counterpoints and things like this. It was fairly simple in terms of the song progressions.
Yeah.
And I think that's just the makeup of those rock bands, right? You just had a couple of guys up there.
Yeah, you got 3 guys up there, and so you don't want to gild the lily too much. You want to be able to play it live still.
Yeah, and one of the I guess one of the examples of like more is more that I can think of is like when you start getting into stuff like ska, where they have like half like a brass section up there playing along with the band. Yeah, I mean, really, more is more as long as there's contrast. Well, and the other thing,
I can't do a solid more is more thing. My brain will start to short circuit if I'm trying to find every little detail, in 30 minutes of cacophonous more is more kind of vibe, like really gone too far.
Well, like orchestral music, right? Like you gotta, like, if you want to fill an entire concert hall, you got like your 120-piece orchestra or whatever. And you can't have just one guy with a violin and a guy on the timpanis in the back. It's not going to work. So you need more. So I think those are good examples. I think orchestral music, definitely you need a bunch of people in there playing all at once.
So one of my pinnacles of more is more would be, let's see, what was it, 1993, I think? Smashing Pumpkins' Siamese Dream. That whole album, and it was produced by Butch Vig.
Of Garbage, yeah.
Yeah, of Garbage.
He also produced Nirvana, didn't he?
Yeah,
He did.
he did produce Nevermind, yeah. Very talented guy. And it's one of the albums, and it's, again, the contrast that Tim, you're talking about, like, you can't do everything all the time, but that's where that album really blew my mind. It really changed my perception, because up to that point I was listening to a lot of stuff like Led Zeppelin, and you just hear kind of the same guitar sound through the whole song, and he would bring in different things, but it was largely, kind of the same. And then when I heard Siamese Dream, it was very much about, the effects they were using, the fuzz that they were using, and it was the light and dark contrast, where it would be something like maybe like a song that maybe people would remember would be like Today, and it's soft, and it starts with the clean guitars, and it's doing that thing, and the verses, it's very happy sounding, but it's kind of clean-ish, and then when the choruses hit, it's like a wall. It's just a huge wall, to the point where, if you're thinking about how to mix a record right, and we've talked about breaking the rules in the right way, You want the vocals to be up front and center, and to sound good and to be the thing that's the focal point. And with that album and a lot of the tracks on there, I mean, the guitars are so huge and so big when they come in that they actually had the vocals be very dry. A lot of times there's just a little bit of the micro detuning from an Eventide on the vocals, but like barely reverb or anything on there. And then they pulled his voice way back, and when the guitars hit, they just took up all that space, and it's like his voice is trying to peek through the guitars a little bit. But then it cuts out when it goes back to the verse, because you can't just stay there. So it's like just blistering you with sound, and then it cuts back, and the mood changes, and then all of a sudden the vocals are pop forward again. There was a lot of really great mixing on that album, because it's even as a teenager listening to that, I was like, this is unbelievable. I've never heard anything like it.
So one question here that I saw, I had put it up, I'm going to bring it back, from Paul. How do you make a part that sounds thin/weak to sound more? You guys have any advice on that?
I answered him on the chat. You contrast it or follow it with something really huge, so it gives it context. It's never good if it's like super filtered and thin, sounding like intentional. You're doing that for effect for a second because you're building tension, right? Especially, let's say it's a guitar part that in the verse is like real small, and then all of a sudden it's coming and it opens up and gets huge, right? Yeah. That's why that moment exists. That's why you would do that, not because it sounds because it's building tension and sort of foreshadowing. It's gonna get big now.
And if it doesn't get big, then you gotta
screw them.
You gotta do something about that. Unless you're Tim and you break all the rules. I'll just give you a hard time.
No, it's cool, and it's like even like filtering a whole mix, rather, which is has been done so many times in pop music and whatnot, especially where everything kind of just gets super thinned out. I think what makes that exciting is not because it by itself sounds great, but because there's something else coming, and it's a contrast, and when that hits, you go, it makes it like, oh my God moment.
Well, there is an album that I have that I used to love until I got a little better at like understanding how things are, and it's an old trance album. It's a compilation called Tunnel Transforce. It's probably like early 2000s sometime. And one of the things that I realize now, like knowing more about production and how things are done, is that entire album has like no mids at all. I don't know what they did, but when I listen to it now, I'm like, this sounds like ass. Like, how did I listen to this? You know what I mean? Like, why did they do that?
Yeah, that is weird.
And part of the problem is like when you have no mids and you're just listening to highs and lows, like it gets like it wears your ears out. You got to have some of that mid range to fill things out.
Yeah, it gets boring real fast. If the curve to the mix is smiley face like that, it gets boring.
But it's amazing because I was like, wow, this was one of my favorite CDs back in the day, and I can't even listen to it now. Yeah. It's awful.
I mean, it was intentional, right? I mean, it wasn't.
Yeah, I guess. I have no idea. None of the other albums I have sound like that. That's the only one. So they've had to have done it intentionally, or somebody made a big mistake in the mastering.
I mean, someone needs to check their mixes or mastering or something. Yeah, that's what happened. Well, that's interesting.
One of the clever tricks that I recall now, just thinking about, I think the early '90s was one of those eras where things got very creative. And a lot of the things that we hear now these days originated from that era. And there's these little pockets in every decade where that happens. But, to think about how you can make one part offset another And to think about the Radiohead song "Creep," which was a huge radio hit, and again it follows that kind of early '90s pattern of kind of quieter, more melodic verses, and then bigger, very bombastic choruses with lots of guitars and everything. But the clever part of that song to me was always like at the end of the verse, they go from a was it C major to C minor chord, and so there's a little harmonic thing that's happening that's very interesting that perks the ears. But then also one of the guitar players, right before everything comes in, before that, he's already got his distortion on and he scratches the string. So it's like a and it's just like telling you like something's about to break loose, and all of a sudden all the guitars come in, and that two little scratches are so impactful. I mean, they're transient short. There's like nothing, but they have such
huge.
a big effect on what's going to come, and you're like, oh crap, shit's about going to go down now.
Yeah, exactly. It does. I wish I could remember how they achieved that effect, other than, I mean, they're like specifically they did a couple things, because those jun those are huge, and like you said, the rest of the mix is kind of floating along, and you know your ears got all safe and sound and accustomed to that little blend, and then all of a sudden it's the
warm blanket, and then it's like, oh
yeah, and then all of a sudden like the evil man is coming to stab your neck.
It's funny because the kind of modern equivalent to something like that I hear in electronic music is you get kind of a more traditional dancey, housey, trancey kind of thing going on, and then all of a sudden they'll have a break, a drop they call it, I guess now. They'll have a drop, and all of a sudden it's just like massive wall of wobbly bass everywhere, and it's a huge like contrast between other sections of the song. I don't know if you guys have listened to any of that stuff, but it's kind of reminds me of what you guys are talking about, just more like in a modern, like it's more contemporary in terms of like what the kids are listening to these days.
Well, there's an analog in film again, like something that's modern, whatever, last 5 or 10 years, is one of my wife's pet peeves in movies, especially like sci-fi and action movies. Like it's that sine wave sweep down, and it's like everything sucks out. There's and then there's usually like some sort of big explosion or something. That's very much the same kind of thing, but being used as ambience in a film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that whole, I mean, film sound design is a whole other thing that I'm like fascinated with. Everything from the Foley, and like I'll watch movies sometimes and I'll hear stuff and I'm like, oh, I wonder how they even do that,
I mean, that's so instructive right there, like about how to have impact between, in contrast, because like this horror film that I scored like 3 years ago now, there's a moment where there are two people, they're just talking, they're reminiscing, they're catching up, and there's a huge jump scare where all of a sudden there's a sword that comes through to the guy they're just talking, and you don't even know where this sword has come from, but then it's that moment where holy, it just, that contrast gets your attention so much, and you can do that in music as well. You can literally do it from going from super peaceful to just all of a sudden, like
there's a sword
instantaneously. Yeah, there's a sword in the guy. And so of course, like I'm having zero music leading up to that. During their conversation, they're just talking, and then of course the second that giant sword comes through the back of him, and he's standing in the doorway, and you just see it come out of the front of him. But that's when, as the music provider, you of course are immediately going to not have the sound of a baby crying. You'll probably it's going to have to be something that's a slap. But I was just thinking of how much that applies to just music, and not even film. I mean, it's everything you're saying, Marshall, about how they have to deal with the same momentum problems, only they have to sustain theirs for nearly 2 hours, and and
Yeah.
we have to go like 6 minutes max or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 3 minutes, like if you want to get it on the radio, I guess, right? So I don't know about you guys, but I have a hard time writing stuff that short. Do you guys have a hard time writing stuff under 4 minutes?
No.
I usually don't write under 4 minutes. But then again, I'm not
Either way,
Tim.
we got him.
No.
Get a book. Okay.
It is hard to write longer form things, shorter like that. Especially Marshall in the style that, in trance or whatever. Like that's hardly enough time to even just get your ideas cooking and
Exactly.
and then it's over. So yeah.
I'm trying to with the stuff I do, I'm trying to make it open ended to where it can be mixed like in a set. So I want to give ample opportunities for a DJ or whoever to be able to come in and out or start it up and at a certain point. And take it out if they need to, so it's a little bit different in that way, I guess. But yeah, it's like I hear radio edits of dance tracks. Sometimes I'm like, you got like enough time for like one full round and then it's like over. I feel like it's not enough time.
Yeah, it's
You go,
not.
You go listen to like a Beach Boys song. It's like 2 minutes or 2.5 minutes, right? Those are super short.
Yeah.
Well, except for Good Vibrations, like what
Yeah,
Cryss was talking about. That's a 6 minute or so song, which is really weird and unusual. But like, there have been those out there, and also you just don't hear that much instrumental music on the radio.
That's a good point. That's a real shame.
Not anymore. I mean,
It is.
It used
It's
to
a real
be
shame.
a lot in the early '60s. That seemed to be kind of a spike or late '50s, early '60s. A real big spike in good instrumental music. I mean, you think about some of these like quirky little songs like Telstar that are just
Right.
epic and they're only a few minutes long.
But and I'm speaking very specifically about terrestrial radio.
Right.
I mean, you can obviously subscribe to a channel and get whatever you want.
That's a nice thing about the internet today is like you can get, if you like long form instrumental, like you can find that.
Yeah.
And you don't have to listen to the Casey Kasem Top 40 or whatever. Well, I don't know. Do they even have that? I know they don't have Casey Kasem anymore. Do they still do Top 40 on the radio? I don't even know.
Oh yeah, it was what's his name for a while doing it. I can't think of who it is. I'm sure everyone else can think of it.
Like
But
Carson Daly or something.
it's it's the other kind of celeb guy that's
Total
like
Request Live, everybody.
It does
Anyway,
seem as
yeah.
far as like music length that coming out
Ryan
of
Seacrest.
Ryan Seacrest. That's right.
it. Seacrest. That's it. Sorry,
coming
Chris.
from the 50s into the 60s, it was like, man, like 3 minutes and you're done. You got to be out, and it was, I'm trying to think, but of like major pop and rock bands. Maybe somebody will have an early example, but I would say like some of the earliest would have been like Hey Jude, and the extended version of Light My Fire would have been songs that really broke the rules as far as music length was concerned. And then you'd have some tracks in the 70s that would do it, like Stairway to Heaven and Bohemian Rhapsody. But those were more the exceptions to the rule. And it seems like it became more and more common, and all of a sudden, like once again, money ruled the day, and it's like, no, make short songs because that's where the money is.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
when you think about it too, it's like that's a whole other aspect of like less is more and more is more. Like maybe a shorter track can be more memorable as well, especially if it's got a good hook.
Well, I mean, sometimes, go back to the Beach Boys. I mean, a short song, maybe 2.5 minutes or something, that is just phenomenally good would be In My Room. And it's a very simple song. The melodies and the harmonies in it are amazing. And then you contrast that to a few years later, and they're doing Good Vibrations, and it's just like a whole nother world, but both are epic songs.
And that's a fantastic point, Marshall. Like, that's when less is more, is when the information that's there means more. you know, and it sinks in more and it's hookier and you remember it more because there's not as much to digest and remember, and that's obviously how they based, you know, came up with the 3 minute and 30 second sort of general rule that's about the attention span that someone wants to listen to a song, you know. So that's a great observation, Marshall, about like in our topic, like how that is a less is more thing, because give me the thing, give me a great hook and get out of my way.
Well, it's funny because songs used to have longer intros than they do today. I don't know if you guys have noticed that either. It used to be a minute and a half before you get to any kind of vocal or chorus or anything.
Yeah.
So, and they kind of don't do that as much anymore, I don't think.
Everything has been condensed from my perspective, you know, doing a lot of song demos here in Nashville. And that's one of the things is that get on with it. Also get to the chorus. Don't bore us. Right. So there's another one of those. And then in between like the first chorus and the next verse, there used to typically be a little more of an interlude musically there before the next verse started in. Now they'll make that go by real fast, and then they'll make that second verse really short, like half, you know, if that sometimes of the first verse and on to the second chorus. So it is that very same thing. Like it's kind of part of what defines popular music in a lot of way right now is that, you know, cut down.
Maybe an example of that would be, what was that song called? Like Royals by Lord?
Mm-hmm.
Where, I mean, it just basically starts with the verse. It like has like a, I don't know. It's been a while since I listened to it. Some sort of like 808 type of kick hits, and then and there's really not any instrumentation. I should go back and listen to it because I thought it was a well done song. But as far as like a song that's very sparse and just gets right to it, there's no playing around, and it just starts singing. And man, I wish if somebody in the chat remembers what the arrangement is of that, I'd like to hear it again, but I just remember like a kick and maybe some other part of percussion or something, and then it's like her voice and some reverb, and I think that's about it.
Cryss, what about the Tonic song, If You Could Only See the Way She Loves Me? You know that one? Maybe. You know, it was like a 90s hit. It starts out with his vocal and guitar, and they're right on the verse. Like there is no intro, there's nothing else. And so, yeah. I mean, that's part of a way to get somebody's attention, and I guess less is more, right?
Something that was brought up in the. What was that?
Okay. I was just gonna say you could just smash a DX7. They'll get some attention.
Well, I mean, there are other ways.
Sorry, go ahead, Cryss.
As long as it's a DX7, though, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's the only thing that's worthless. Like,
I mean, I'm down with that.
I think I could use this for any other synth except one of those because they're brown and they're awful. Go ahead. Continue.
They're brown and they're awful. Quote of the night.
Earlier in the chat, a great example was brought up. Pull it up on the screen here. So Steve says, David Townsend manages to pull off more is more all the time. Guitar swimming in delay, 8 vocal tracks, synth galore, everything else, and somehow he makes it all work. And I was thinking about that because, I mean, there's a little bit of magic going, and I had the same kind of thought in listening to his music. I don't know if you guys have you heard any of this stuff?
I haven't, I don't think. I may have. I do have a 14-year-old daughter who listens to all kinds of music. So in case it's not music for adults, I might have heard it through that.
So this is like, I don't know what I would call it. Symphonic prog, maybe. And he's got an unbelievable voice. I mean, it's crazy. And he plays guitar as well. And so so the song, check out, maybe something to start with would be Kingdom by Devin Townsend. And maybe, what's that other one? Storm Chasing or something. But try Kingdom first. And it's nuts. And even live, they're doing, I mean, they got two guitars, bass, drums, like a choir of vocals. He's got like a Stormbender. Yeah, that's it. But Kingdom, like just like all these things going on, synthesizers and stuff in the song. And I've heard some symphonic rock that's like, oh my gosh, this is so overdone. It's like one of those stacked Rompler patches where there's like 30 things going on. You're like, this doesn't sound fat at all as a single mode oscillator. You know, it can have that effect. But I think I was thinking after that comment came up, it's like, what really makes a song like that work? Because there is so much dense stuff in there. And I got to thinking about like the contrast, because dynamically the song is not changing a whole lot. It's like pretty amped up all the way. But one of the things that like I think he pulls off is like when you listen to the guitars and the bass and the drums, if you stripped away everything else, it'd basically be metal, and it's chunky, and you know it's very rhythmic, and a lot of like transient information happening there. But then there's this whole other kind of cloud layer to it that's all these background vocals and the synthesizers and everything that's just kind of a haze around that at another layer. And then kind of sitting between those is his voice, which is like really narrow. It's really narrowed in on his voice. But to have that kind of soft, wispy layer going, and then this really intense up, forward, up front rhythmic thing, that may be the reason like they're getting so many things going on, and yet you can hear distinctly all these different parts in the recording.
That's tricky to do, but I love it when I hear it. And I've always been I'm a fan of more is more, but I just tend to notice that the things I like sonically tend to be less is more. But like there's so many great more is more tracks in the world, you know, like. And I do like it when it gets out of control and the vocal is trying so hard to peep through, you know, to push through the track, you know, and it just makes everything else seem so much more intense because the vocal just feels like it's fighting, you know, and that's a cool like effect, you know.
It's funny you say that. When you said that, the first thing I thought of was the Hans Zimmer score in Interstellar, because there was a part, especially when I don't know if you guys are familiar with the movie, but there's a part where the guy's daughter like discovers the answer to this equation they've been trying to figure out, and the music gets really loud, and you can like barely hear her talking. You can make it out, but you're like, kind of like, you know, it's like you're squinting with your ears because you're trying to hear what she's saying.
Yeah, that's so effective, right?
Yeah, it's totally for effect. So I guess more is more can mean more volume on the organs in a Hans Zimmer soundtrack.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Or, you know, you think about the big swell that happens in A Day in the Life by John Lennon, you know, and it's orchestral insanity, but then it you know, it goes somewhere, it does something, it doesn't just live there.
Tension and release.
Tension and release in contrast. So, yeah. I mean, I'm a Frank Zappa fan, so more is more can work for me. Definitely, like clustery, lot of information, lots of rhythmic info, lots of harmonic info. You know, chromatic kind of craziness, but organized chaos in a way. I can get to
that. I think if, you know, in terms of like kind of analogizing it to art in a way, you can have something that's very, very simple. You know, even something, I wish I had a better knowledge of art, but you know, you take something like a Bob Dylan song and it might be like just a single statue. You know, it's there, like you can touch it, you can feel it, you see your way around it. It's not very big. It's just there. And then something, you know, like David says here, My Bloody Valentine, some of their shoegaze stuff is just, it's like a collage. It's like a sound collage. And there's so many little parts that are going, but they don't, one doesn't overtake another. And they're just like, you almost have a hard time pulling out the pieces, and that can be sort of an effect also where the more is not necessarily more punchy, but it's more of an abstraction in the sound.
Well, it's interesting because like when I listen, I don't listen to music like I think normal people, because I literally sit there and try and be like, what is that? What how many things am I hearing? What does this sound? What is all that? And it's almost like if you think about like if you were to take a and look inside of a working machine, like a mechanism, like it's kind of like what that is of sound.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So for whatever reason, like I tend to really try and focus on that and like see how it's all working with my ears. So if I can't hear certain things, like I get kind of frustrated because I don't know what it is, and it makes me upset.
It's frustrating. I get that though, yeah, because you're wanting to, you're analyzing the music as at the same time as just listening. So yeah, if you're not able to pinpoint what it is, that's frustrating, right?
Get on the phone and call them up and be like, "What did you do?"
Yeah,
I can't hear. I have felt like that. I mean, there's times where, again, it's done for the effect. So as you described it, you have to squint with your ears, which means you're paying attention.
That should be a shirt. We should make a T-shirt of that.
Yes,
with your ears.
I love that.
At other times, there's been so many little parts and songs that I'm like, that sounds so interesting, but I can't really hear it. And I would like to hear what are they actually playing that it's being obscured, or what effect is that that's kind of being mixed in, and those kind of things. And I've always really treasured when they've done the kind of extended album releases with the tracks and different arrangements, or when they did those whatever that video game was, Rock Band or whatever, where they had isolated tracks that you could listen to. I don't think I think I've played one of those games once, but they've always posted on YouTube the raw source, and not pulled out of the track with something like Isotopes RX9 or whatever, but actually the real track unmolested. This is what it is by itself.
So in that game, you could actually like pull the layers apart in the songs?
I don't know. I think they may have asked
I guess it would make sense because those games were designed to have like 4 or 5 people like be the band, right?
Uh-huh.
So I guess like if you wanted to mute the drums, you probably could, right? Or if you wanted to mute the bass.
I think that's why they did that.
That's pretty cool, actually. That kind of makes me want to get a Rock Band game then. And
now I have to tell you, like, I was terrible at it, and I felt really bad about like that. I play guitar and stuff, but I couldn't do that game at all. And I saw a video where I think it was Rush, come backstage after a concert or something. And they said, "Hey, we've got this video game, and Tom Sawyer, their song is on there." And so they had the 3 guys play through the song, and they scored terrible, like I don't remember what it was, 18% or something on their own song.
Yeah, it's a completely different muscle memory.
Oh, that's incredible. Oh my God.
You guys can't even play your own song on Rock Band.
What a different judgmental set of criteria that game must use, to when you got the real guys playing it, it's saying, no, it doesn't go like that. That's too good.
Like, no, dude, you did it wrong. You did your own song wrong.
You did it so right that you must know, because we got to dumb it down for most people, right? Like, I mean, how else could that be happening? That's crazy. That's crazy. Funny story.
Yeah, that's a good one to watch.
Well, guys, we got about 9 minutes left. I don't know if we want to say our goodbyes.
Let's say, I'm trying to think. It's like, is there anything we haven't covered? I love these conversations. Like we've kind of explored a lot of different places, and there's hopefully been a lot of useful information for people to check out. Certainly got me thinking about a lot of things, and going back to listen to some tracks that demonstrate this.
Well, I think one thing we forgot to mention is definitely need more cowbell.
Oh yeah, well,
More cowbell.
Obviously. I'm surprised nobody mentioned that until now.
It was it's low-hanging fruit right there.
There we go, man. That's me all the way.
Yeah, I'm just surprised like you are that nobody else, did the more cowbell. Turn it up.
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of much else to say. It's a fun topic to discuss. I actually kind of went into some areas I hadn't anticipated, like the film industry and kind of how some of this plays in with the styles of music and things that they do in film as well. Because that's a whole other thing. And Tim, you've done some scoring. I did some scoring once, but it was for a terrible mockumentary, and I did it on like a $50 MIDI tracker, so it's not good. But
hey, but you did it.
I have a credit on IMDb for it.
Well, and also like not so much a matter of that, but I'm sure it was still a learning experience, right? Because it's such a different application of your music.
Yeah, I'd like to get more into that somehow. That the whole scoring thing would be fun, or even Foley and sound design for sound effects. That would be fun too, I think.
Yeah. Even if
they're kind of two different departments, right? You don't usually have the guy doing the score do your sound effects. Mm-hmm. Do you?
No, but it would depend. I mean, I think that might be a more modern approach anymore, to actually have the score and the sound effects a little bit of a blurred line between the two.
For some things, maybe.
Yeah, I don't mean like straight up like, somebody walking down a hallway kind of thing.
Yeah, doing all the Foley.
Well,
but
I think,
where the soundtrack
indie
is
movies, that would probably
abstract.
happen a lot more, where they have a little more freedom because they're self-financing, whereas big studios probably don't want to pay Hans Zimmer for Foley.
Yeah, they probably think his time's better spent playing his organs as loud as possible.
I just mean where the soundtrack itself is more abstract and just noise-based. So where those two kind of the line blurs a little bit.
Well, you think about, like, there's a lot of synthesizers that are used in the sound design process. Stuff you guys might be able to hear it, but I think the layperson who doesn't know anything about these things may not really understand. Like, that's a LFO just going whoa whoa whoa, or something, or that's just some noise on a synthesizer with some reverb. It's a sweep, you know what I mean? It's stuff like that, and you hear it, and you're like, I could have made that. I could have made that. Like, hire me. I'll make that.
There was several. So my wife and I love sci-fi, and we've been watching some foreign sci-fi that's overdubbed. Because hell, if I want to sit and read for an entire movie, but I'll watch. I don't care. I don't care if the lips don't match. Give me an overdubbed movie. But I watched a German movie or German series, and also South American. I don't remember if it was. I think it was Brazilian, maybe. Really interesting. One of those soundtracks, I remember, like I was not thinking about it as I was watching. I was doing stuff on the computer and watching it. I was like, "What the hell is that?" Like, I know what that is, and then I stopped and I paid attention, and it was literally the motif of many of the scenes was somebody with a self-resonant filter, and it just sweeping through the harmonics, and so like that chain of harmonics of like. What are those intervals? I know those intervals from somewhere, and I listened to what the sound was like. Oh, that's all they're doing. They're just sweeping a resonant filter through it.
That's interesting, but and like you said, though, you knew what it was.
Yeah, the average person would not have picked up on there. It would just been, maybe they thought it was a synthesizer or something. It just wouldn't have picked up on there, but it was just so familiar because that's the kind of stuff that we do that you're like, wait, what is that? I know that. Or there was that what I had posted about sound design. There was a thread on Gearspace where they're talking about sci-fi sound design and synthesizers and getting into what was used on certain things, like the crazy like home modded organ that was used for the transporter sounds on the original Star Trek.
That's what they used? An organ?
It wasn't. Yeah, it was a crazy like modded organ.
Well, because
in that thread, there's the original sound sample, like without any effects or anything, and you can hear the guy talking before and after it.
You should send me that link. I'm interested, because here's the thing with that sound. I remember I got a Virus A long time ago, and it has a sound that sounds almost exactly like the transporter sound on Next Generation.
Yeah, well, I mean, that would have been something else, but the original series, that was an organ.
Oh, you're talking about... Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
I was thinking Next Generation the whole time.
Marshall, funny you should ask for a link for that. That link is in our Facebook group.
Oh, sweet.
Thru Port Collective. And there's a small thread on it.
Okay, yeah.
And if anybody else would like to join us through the week, we have ongoing chats about all this kind of fun stuff.
Yes.
Surround sound cowbell.
Yeah, join us on the Facebook group. Yeah, that's fun to do. I it's fun to just kind of see what comes up and.
I didn't see it. I was in a hurricane. Sorry.
Oh yeah, it's okay.
I could use that for 1 week, and then next week I'd be in trouble.
You still got some time, then you can still milk that.
Nah, I got power now, so it's like. Anyways, yeah.
Oh, so we also want to mention next week is going to be a very fun week, provided everything works out and schedules work out. And if it does, and if it doesn't, we'll do it another week, but it should be this coming Wednesday. We're going to be joined by Cy Alexander, and we're going to be talking, again, vintage and modern synthesizers, and in particular, because the Oberheim OBXA is such an amazing synth and the hot thing right now. And Tim owns one, and Marshall owns one, and Cy owns one, and I'm the poor sucker that's had to borrow one. So we'll at least get to discuss it next week, and so it should be a really fun episode. Cy is incredible. He's one of the people that I've actually got to talk to in person, and the first time that he was out in my area and we got together for dinner, we literally talked about music and synthesizers for 6 hours straight. Just like, that was it. It was just like we were all in on it. And so
that's awesome.
It's been a great friend, and we're really looking forward to having him on the show.
Yeah. He's got a great collection of synths, and he's a super cool guy. So, yeah, it'd be super awesome. Chat with him. I was going to say, though, Chris, possession is 90% of the loss. So technically, you might be able to get away with.
I told him when he gets my buddy gets back from Italy, I might not be available for a while.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, man. I'm sick, and I can't come over.
So of course, Cy has the originals.
Yes, that'll be
OBX, OBXA, OB8. Two voice. I don't remember. I mean, he's got so many things I can't even keep track of them. But
it would be interesting to hear his thoughts. I know Oberheim has done a pretty good job of doing some videos with comparisons, but obviously they got a motive to sell their instrument. So I'd be definitely interested to hear what Cy's got to say about the comparison. I think they're probably pretty close.
Yeah.
That will be cool. Yes, and just to hear his perspective on vintage synths in general is going to be cool, because I actually do own a couple, but like he owns all of them, I think.
Yeah, it seemed like it. We'll have to ask him.
He does.
Which ones are you missing? Because asking you which ones you have will take 70 years.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, which ones do you want that you do not have?
That you don't have. Yeah.
I gotta see if I can work this out here, but. Okay, wait. Let's try that. And oh, there it is.
Oh,
There it
oh,
is.
there it is. That's here. Let me
Oh,
make it-
very nice. That's hilarious.
That's what size studio looks like.
That is Size Studio, right? Oh,
There he is.
there's.
He looks like he's taking a nap. He fell asleep in his synth cave.
Oh,
Yeah,
and
he's-
they're right behind me is one of them, OB something. Is that the
So,
OB8 or I don't know.
so an imperfect's asking if the DX7 is
Oh, yeah.
vintage. I will say yes, it's vintage garbage.
Vintage garbage.
Is garbage. I don't like that sound. Sorry, guys.
All right.
Well, yeah.
We'll end it on that. Thanks. All right, guys. Yeah, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Check us out on Facebook, Thru Port Collective. And you guys want to do a quick little go around the horn here and let everyone know what's going on for you guys this next week? Let's start with you, Chris.
Yeah. Well, I've been so dang busy, and I did have some time to spend with this lovely, beautiful synthesizer here, and I've made a few patches already and have been checking everything out on it. So I got homework to do for next Wednesday. I get to know this a lot better, so tomorrow again at 2 p.m. Los Angeles, 5 p.m. New York, 10 p.m. London. The track that Brian and I did, Gethsemane Music, will be premiering. That's the word, premiering. And so I'll have Brian will have links up. I'll have links up, and you guys can check that out. And I hope you will enjoy it. But yeah, that'll be what I'm up to, and then hopefully I'll get a little bit of downtime just for fooling around with music and making more music.
So, Chris, I expect to have a synth report on my desk on next Wednesday, since you got some homework on that OBX8.
What's the grading criteria?
Well, if you do anything at all, you get an A. So there you go. We'll make it easy.
Yeah.
Tim, what's going on with you, brother?
And it's a simple week for me. I'm headed to New York City tomorrow, and I'll be there. It's just like on pleasure, and I'll be there until the day before our show. So I'm not going to have a lot to talk about in terms of anything I've gotten accomplished, but I do intend to go out and hear some music while I'm there, obviously. And
Awesome.
yeah, and that's kind of what's going on in my world. I'm going to actually disappear for a while to the Big Apple. I did start a little list of things about the OBX8 though that I wanted to observe, both positive and negative. So I've got my little list going here.
Wait,
Nice.
so you'll have a synth report as well. Excellent.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, I can if
Well,
you like.
you already get an A because you already wrote some stuff down.
Oh, teacher's pet.
Well, for me, guys, like I'll be working on my live set still. Hopefully, I'll get that done sooner than later. I know some people are kind of chomping at the bit for me to get that done, and I am happy to report making some good progress. So hopefully soon. Other than that, tomorrow, Mente Mechanica comes out on my label Overclock Music, so you guys can check that out if you'd like. It'll be on Spotify as well if you guys are streamers as opposed to downloaders. So check it out there. And other than that, I guess we'll see you guys next week.
All right. And I put in the chat, like, we usually don't say anything just because, we don't want to waste a lot of time. But after a few weeks, maybe we should, like, if you like it, hit the like button or whatever, share it, all that stuff that everybody wastes time with. Anyways.
No, that's good. That's important.
Yeah, we should try.
Since we're taking since we're taking the time to actually do the show, it would probably be nice to try to increase our viewership, at least on that level.
Indeed.
Absolutely.
Thanks everyone in the chat room for joining us. We'll see you guys next week, hopefully as well. We'll have Cy here, so you guys can check out his humongous synth collection in the background, and hopefully you'll get some good feedback from him, all things OBX8, as well as probably some other stuff he's got going on. So that'll be fun.
Yeah.
All right. Well, see you guys.
Bye, guys.
Thanks. So long.